Before wheat, before corn, before modern farming, native tribes had already mastered sustainable food. In 1855, explorers wrote that their fields grew themselves, but within 50 years, colonization erased their seeds, their recipes, their stories. So how did we lose vegetables that fed millions, and why are scientists racing to bring them back? Let's uncover it.
So, there we go. We got one Timpsina, and that's what it'll look like.
Number 16, wild parsnip. Beneath the tall grass of the Great Plains grew a root with a golden glow, wild parsnip. Native families roasted it until sweet, soft, and caramel-scented, calling it the prairie's honey. It wasn't fancy, but it fed entire camps through lean seasons. This root did more than fill bellies. Boiled, it eased pain and fevers. Crushed, it treated wounds. Early settlers in the 1800s learned its value from tribal gatherers and soon grew it near homesteads. Yet within decades, the plow and the promise of profit erased it. Wheat replaced it. Corn silenced it. Today, wild parsnip survives only in ditches and forgotten fields. Scientists say it once restored soil health, supporting bees and prairie plants that kept the ecosystem alive. What used to sustain humans now survives without them. However, deeper in those same valleys, another survivor waited, a leafy ancestor of quinoa that once fed ancient cities. How did a weed feed a civilization, then vanish from history's plate? Number 15. Goosefoot Greens. Long before cornfields lined the Midwest, cities like Cahokia thrived on a small green, goosefoot. Archaeologists found its seeds sealed in clay pits from 200 BC, proof of a forgotten farm system that sustained tens of thousands. Its leaves were boiled into soups rich in calcium and iron. Its seeds were ground for porridge or bread. This single plant formed the backbone of the Eastern agricultural complex, North America's first farming revolution. Goosefoot didn't just grow, it built cities. But around 1000 AD, maize arrived. It yielded faster and demanded space. Farmers abandoned goosefoot, and in time, it vanished into wild fence lines. Modern biologists later discovered it's genetically tied to quinoa, meaning America had its own superfood long before imports. However, where river soil bred greens, the plains baked something tougher, a root so steady it became the Lakota's lifeline. Could one humble tuber truly be the bread of the open prairie? Number 14. Prairie Turnip. When summer storms cracked the Dakota soil, gatherers followed the scent of rain to uncover prairie turnips, round roots hiding beneath the tall grass. They called them Timpsula, and for centuries they fed migrating tribes when hunting failed. The roots roasted like chestnuts and dried into cakes that lasted all winter. In 1804, Lewis and Clark recorded eating Timpsula gifted by native guides, proof of its importance on the plains. Its nutrients were rare for such harsh land: protein, potassium, and natural sugar, all packed into one small root. Women stored hundreds each season, hanging them to dry in the wind. Each bulb survived. But when settlers plowed the prairie for wheat, the root vanished beneath their wheels. Still, near those riverbeds, another miracle crop waited, one that wound itself through the mud, binding communities with its vines. Could this climbing root really hold 3 times the protein of potatoes? Number 13. Indian potato. Along the riverbanks from Maine to Texas grew a vine that fed families for centuries, the Indian potato, known to scientists as Apios americana. It looked ordinary, but one handful carried 3 times the protein of a white potato. That single fact explains why early native settlements formed near its roots. Tribes like the Wampanoag, Cherokee, and Creek relied on it. They roasted the tubers, boiled them with cornmeal, or stored them underground through harsh winters. Archaeologists found evidence of Apios cultivation in sites over 3,000 years old, meaning it predated European farming across the continent. When colonists arrived, they tasted it too. In 1623, English settlers wrote that native people fetched roots which they called groundnuts, very good to eat. By the mid-1800s, even American farmers experimented with it as a potato substitute. But when industrial agriculture took over, the vine was left behind, tangled in forgotten wetlands. Yet that same soil held another native flavor, sharp, fragrant, and traded like currency. Could one wild onion really have been North America's first spice in medicine? In one? Number 12. Nodding onion. Before salt, before pepper, native cooks reached for something else: the nodding onion. Its pinkish stalks bent gracefully under the sun, but its flavor carried a punch strong enough to fill a whole campfire stew. Tribes across the Great Lakes, from the Sioux to the Potawatomi, used these bulbs as seasoning, food, and medicine. Dried bulbs flavored soups through long winters, while crushed leaves treated coughs and infections. Even explorers in the 1700s traded for it, describing it as wild garlic with a sweetness unknown in Europe. What makes this story special is how universal the onion became. It grew in every region of North America, thriving on rocky hills and meadows that defeated most crops. Native families taught early settlers how to dig them gently, keeping enough bulbs for the next season. However, the onion's wild cousin still holds a bigger secret: a climbing vine that acted like both bean and potato, giving steady protein when harvests failed. How could one woodland plant feed generations long before farms or fences ever existed? Number 11. Hopnes Bean. In damp forests and along quiet rivers, a slender vine climbed upward, the Hopnes bean or groundnut vine. This wasn't a garden bean. It grew wild, twisting through reeds, producing plump tubers that fueled tribes across the eastern woodlands. The Narragansett, Lenape, and Powhatan prized it. Women gathered the vines in early fall, roasting the beans or boiling them with wild greens. French explorers in the 1600s noted that the natives eat of these roots daily, sweet and full of nourishment. They were right. Hopnes contained nearly 15 grams of protein per cup, a complete food that built strength and endurance. In 1623, when colonists faced famine in Plymouth, native families shared their harvest of groundnuts, saving dozens of lives. That gift rarely makes the history books. However, deep in those same forests, another secret waited: a crisp root with the clean taste of cucumber, used to treat fever and thirst. Could something so refreshing really have been hidden underfoot for centuries? 10. Indian cucumber root. Deep in the forests of the Northeast grew a root that looked plain but tasted like something straight from a garden: crisp, cool, and fresh. The Indian cucumber root was the survival food of the Iroquois, Cherokee, and Mohegan tribes. When hunting trips stretched too long or water ran low, a single bite refreshed like spring rain. It got its name for a reason. The white, juicy root carried a clean cucumber flavor. Hunters often dug it up in silence, chewing it for energy and hydration. Herbalists brewed its stems into tea to calm fever and stomach pain. Early botanists in the 1700s called it the sweetest root of the woods. Even soldiers during the American Revolution reportedly used it when rations failed. But today you'll barely see it, even in the wild. Overharvesting and habitat loss nearly erased it. However, as this root faded, another plant began climbing. Literally. Its leaves looked like weeds, but its seeds carried the story of North America's first farmers. Could a forgotten wild green really predate kale by 1,000 years? Number 9. Lamb's quarters. Before anyone ever said superfood, native farmers were growing lamb's quarters, the original wild spinach. It spread naturally across the plains, thriving in poor soil, sun, or shade. Tribes harvested both its soft leaves and tiny black seeds, which contained more iron than spinach and more calcium than milk. For the Mandan, Zuni, and Hopi, lamb's quarters filled cooking pots daily. They boiled it into soups, dried it for winter, and ground the seeds into flour. Archaeologists found its remains in ancient storage pits dating back 3,500 years, proof it was one of the first plants ever domesticated in North America. Then colonization came. European crops pushed it aside, labeling it a weed. But scientists later confirmed its seeds had high protein and omega fats, making it nearly identical in value to modern quinoa. In fact, quinoa is its cousin. However, as the green that fed cities disappeared, its yellow-flowered rival took root across the plains. That rival would soon feed explorers, travelers, and traders alike. How did a sunflower's hidden twin become the plains' most misunderstood crop? Number 8. Jerusalem artichoke. Few people know the Jerusalem artichoke isn't from Jerusalem, and it's not an artichoke. It's a sunflower, a North American one. Tribes across the plains cultivated its roots long before European contact, roasting them for their sweet, nutty flavor. When French settlers tasted it in the 1600s, they called it topinambur after a Brazilian tribe they'd recently met, confusing its origins forever. Each tuber held more inulin fiber than any known vegetable at the time. That made it a lifesaver, slow digesting, filling, and nourishing during harsh winters. The Iroquois and Cree roasted it into hearty stews, others mashed it into flour. Thomas Jefferson even planted it at Monticello in 1774, praising its infinite yield. However, as sugar and potatoes spread, the sunchoke vanished from kitchens. Its name faded too, a double disappearance, yet its return feels near. Nutritionists now study its prebiotic effects for gut health, and farmers see it as a drought-resistant miracle crop. Still, one wild fruit, hiding on the plains, once fed travelers too. But could something that looked like a plum actually be a bean? Number 7. Ground plum. In the grasslands stretching from Texas to Saskatchewan, there grows a strange plant, its pods shaped like tiny purple plums. The Pawnee and Dakota called it a traveler's snack, plucking it fresh during hunts. But early botanists were puzzled. Thomas Nuttall, in 1811, noted that these plums grow on vines, yet bear no stones. That's because they weren't fruits at all. They were legumes rich in protein, iron, and carbohydrates. Ground plums ripened in June, just when food ran scarce between planting and harvest. Their taste fell somewhere between pea and apple, earthy and slightly sweet. The roots helped hold fragile prairie soil together, restoring nitrogen long before modern science explained why it mattered. In a way, the plant was both food and ecosystem engineer. However, when settlers brought cattle, these wild vines declined fast. Some species even became endangered. However, far to the northwest, another root waited underground, one so sweet it required 3 days of roasting. Archaeologists say it powered entire tribes for millennia. But could something that sweet also hold spiritual meaning tied to the land itself? Number 6. Blue Camas. Across the high meadows of the Pacific Northwest, the ground once shimmered blue each spring. Those fields weren't flowers for beauty, they were food. The blue camas bulb fed tribes like the Nez Perce, Yakima, and Lakapamucks for over 4,000 years. Families dug the bulbs after the bloom, roasted them for 3 straight days in earth ovens, and waited for a miracle, caramelization. The result was soft, brown, and sweet, tasting like baked pear. It became both a meal and a ceremony, served during feasts celebrating the season's renewal. Archaeologists have uncovered entire ancient ovens still filled with charred camas remains, proving its scale of use rivaled early grain farms. But harvesting came with risk. Mixed among camas fields grew a deadly look-alike. Death camas, a white-flowered plant that could kill within hours. Foragers learned patience and precision, guided by elders who passed that skill like sacred knowledge. Then, as trade routes expanded, another route took over, smaller, tougher, but essential for travelers crossing the Rockies. How could one humble mountain carrot save lives during brutal winters? Number 5. Yampa Root. High in the Rockies, where frost bit through the soil, grew the Yampa Root, a lifeline for travelers and hunters. Early explorers called it the mountain carrot, but to the Ute, Shoshone, and Paiute, it meant survival. The roots were slender and crisp, tasting faintly of parsley. Hunters chewed them raw for quick energy, while families roasted them or dried them into thin strips for journeys. Lewis and Clark mentioned Yampa in their journals of 1805, describing how tribes offered it as food during crossings where no crops could grow. Its strength came from adaptability, thriving in thin soil, enduring drought, and regenerating fast after harvest. It fed people through lean winters when the game vanished. Scientists later found it rich in potassium and fiber, perfect for endurance in cold, high-altitude air. However, as the rocky trails connected to the plains, tribes began trading roots for seeds, bright orange, soft, and tied to ancient gardens. Could one humble blossom truly carry the memory of America's first cultivated fields? Number 4. Squash blossoms. Centuries before grocery stores and seed catalogs, native gardens across the Southwest thrived with colors, textures, and flavor. Among them grew the squash blossoms, bright, edible flowers that symbolized life itself. The Hopi, Mandan, and Zuni cultivated heirloom varieties like the blue squash and yellow crookneck long before 1000 AD. These blossoms weren't decorative. They were breakfast, medicine, and trade. Cooked with cornmeal and beans, they brought delicate sweetness to hearty stews. Spanish explorers arriving in the 1500s wrote with surprise about how tribes use flowers in their meals as if they were fruit. Each bloom carried generations of seed keeping. Families saved them by hand, trading across tribal routes that stretched thousands of miles, from the deserts of Arizona to the plains of the Dakotas. Even today, DNA studies show those ancient seeds still survive in a few native gardens. However, hidden beneath those fields grew another food, plain, overlooked, yet essential. Its roots powered entire communities alongside corn and beans. But how could a forgotten twin of the sunflower shape early farming across America? Number 3. Wild sunflower root. Before golden fields of corn ruled the Midwest, wild sunflowers covered the landscape. But what few remember is that native farmers didn't just eat the seeds, they ate the roots. Archaeologists have found roasted sunflower roots in ancient hearths dating back 3,000 years. These roots stored starch, minerals, and steady energy. Tribes like the Osage and Pawnee cooked them beside maize and beans, forming what historians now call the Three Sisters of the Plains. French explorers in the 1600s documented them as the bread of the prairie. What's striking is how efficient they were. Wild sunflower roots regenerated fast, required little water, and could grow almost anywhere. They represented sustainability long before the term existed. But as agriculture industrialized, these plants vanished, replaced by single-crop farming. Still, the legacy of those fields lived on, through the bright greens that once fed empires. The next leaf, banned under colonial law, yet secretly preserved, carried rebellion in every bite. Could one outlawed plant really hold the memory of a civilization? Number 2. Amaranth Greens. Amaranth greens were more than food. They were defiance. Across the Southwest, Aztec, Hopi, and Pueblo farmers grew amaranth thousands of years before European contact. Its leaves offered rich iron and calcium, while its seeds packed full protein. Spanish colonizers arrived in 1521 and quickly outlawed it, calling the plant pagan because it appeared in sacred ceremonies. Fields were burned and possession of its seeds was punished. Yet the plant survived, hidden in mountain gardens and carried in secret by native women who refused to let it die. Even in modern tests, amaranth leaves rival spinach, while the seeds rival quinoa. NASA once studied it in the 1980s as a potential space crop due to its resilience. But native farmers already knew its value. It thrived in heat, drought, and thin soil where European grains failed. And in the harshest deserts of all, one final crop carried that same spirit, small, white, and nearly immortal. Could a bean that endured 110 degrees Fahrenheit heat really become the blueprint for future farming? Number 1. Tepary bean. The tepary bean was once the toughest crop in North America. It thrived where almost nothing else could. In 110 degrees Fahrenheit desert heat with barely a drop of rain. The Tohono O'odham people of southern Arizona mastered its cultivation thousands of years ago, building an entire food system around its endurance. The beans grew fast after summer monsoons, maturing in less than 60 days. Families saved the seeds generation after generation, planting them in dry riverbeds where flash floods briefly moistened the soil. Spanish settlers in the 1600s wrote that the tepary feeds the desert people when the corn fails. Modern scientists later found that tepary beans hold up to 25% protein, higher than most modern soybeans. They fix nitrogen naturally, restoring barren soil instead of depleting it. When drought hit the Southwest in the 1970s, researchers rediscovered the crop, calling it a future food for a warming planet. But revival came with debate. Some claimed genetic modification could make it grow faster. Others said it should remain untouched, sacred. And that question, whether nature should be improved or preserved, leads straight into one of history's oldest farming dilemmas, one that changed the face of early America forever. The story doesn't end here. It's only beginning. Click the next video on your screen right now before it disappears. Another forgotten story is waiting, and its story changes everything.